Hello and welcome here to Premier Injuries, and today we've got our discussion with the fantasy doctor, Dr. Raj Brar from 3CB Performance. Now, it's a little bit different today. Obviously, usually Ben takes this one, whereas I'm taking it today. But this message still stays the same of remember to like, share and subscribe to our channel, but also 3CB Performance, because there's so much great content that you produce there, Raj. But we are talking about actually our team that we share an affinity for here. We have to start off with David Luiz's injury. It seems a bit of a sad one because this could be actually the last time we see him in an Arsenal shirt. Arteta's latest is we don't know. He felt something in his hamstring, so it's not good news. From your professional opinion here, Raj, what do you think about the David Luiz injury? Is this basically a career ender because he's only got a few months left on his contract?
It really depends. If it's a low grade 1 injury, you're looking at 7 to 10 days, so he could be back quickly. Grade 2 is typically around 20 to 21 days, and so that may or may not put him at jeopardy. And so, I mean, it's not overall a surprising injury. Whenever you come back from a layoff, there's always that injury risk, especially for soft tissue, for muscular injuries. And so it really just comes down to how the injury is evolving over time. And so that's likely why they don't know quite yet. We will see. Lacazette has been out now almost 2 weeks with an injury as well. So, there's a lot of variance on hamstring injuries. If I remember correctly, when he came back out and was iced up, it was in the middle of his hamstring, which is a good sign because injuries that are closer up to the butt area, the origin we call it, tend to last or linger a bit longer.
So continuing the discussion there with David Luiz, and you've mentioned him there as well, Lacazette. These have both been hamstring injuries. With the biggest game of the season coming up against Villarreal, is there any way to, speed up a hamstring injury at all, or is it just rest and relaxation that is the best way to get that healed?
You need time to really recover, to be honest with you, and so you can't really rush a hamstring injury, or you will re-injure it. And
unfortunately, with that situation, then it's unlikely. Do you think that we'll see Lacazette starting on Thursday against Villarreal?
I think it's a possibility to see him start just because he's now been over 2 weeks. And to your question you had asked, can you rush back a hamstring? Not really, because hamstrings, you can, right? Of course, you can always rush back any injury, but it's going to significantly increase re-injury risk, especially with hamstrings that already have a high recurrence rate. I feel like the latest data, 30% of players re-injure their hamstrings within the first 2 weeks after returning. That being said, if you look at how the Arsenal physios have handled hamstrings this year, it's been quite good. Holding came back early. Partey had a hamstring injury after the 2 quad injuries, hasn't had an issue since. And so, I really do trust how they've handled hamstrings. So if they clear Lacazette to play, I'm confident that he's able to withstand the grueling nature of a match. That being said, nothing is ever guaranteed, right? Within medicine, you can clear every test and still get re-injured. Partey versus Tottenham cleared 3 stress tests, got re-injured. It's all probabilities.
Just on that, with Arsenal, they do say that the backroom staff, they're the best Bruno in the Premier League, they say, because of the great work that he's done with our injuries.
Yeah. Also, people don't realize, people always give Bruno the credit, but Jordan Rees was promoted to head lead physio this year as well. He came up through the academy as well. So he deserves a lot of credit as well.
Oh, well, there you go. Give Jordan Rees the credit where it's due as well. The best Jordan in the Premier League, we'll say as well. Moving it on, though, to somebody else, though. So we talked about David Luiz there. That could be his last time in an Arsenal shirt. But we do know that Sergio Aguero will be coming to the end of his career at Manchester City. And, I, for one, as a football fan, will be sad to see it. But we do have to actually analyse what has been happening there with Sergio Aguero. In the last few games of his Man City career, it's been blighted with COVID contraction, knee injury, then a second knee injury. Do you think, though, that the fact that he started this weekend, he's going to get more minutes towards the end of the season as a send-off? Or is Pep still going to be focused on tactically beating his opponents week in, week out?
I think in this case, Pep with Aguero will give him some minutes if he's able to withstand them, especially with the cushion that they have in the Premier League. And so I think it will be a good send off for him. And I think Pep understands those moments and how much they mean to players and clubs. So I definitely anticipate him getting more minutes, and and he's looked pretty dang good. So there's no indication as to why not to give him minutes.
Yeah, some people are talking about him as a potential differential in terms of fantasy Premier League coming
Yeah.
towards the end of the season. And moving on to another group of individuals here, we're talking about hamstrings. Obviously, they're one of the most occurring injuries in the Premier League. We've got Aaron Cresswell and Mikel Antonio, who both returned this weekend and gave the Hammers a big boost. Cresswell, especially himself, had a good bounce back, creative defender, 5 chances created this weekend, an XA of 0.23. But I do want to ask you about the management of these two individuals. I think a lot of Premier League fans will be interested because Cresswell is historically more hardy. We do know Antonio's injury problems. So do you think that these two players will be managed differently? Or with the UCL in sight, the Champions League, will Moyes actually take a bit of a gamble knowing that Antonio will probably have most of the summer to recover?
Yeah, I would lean firstly to answer your question. I think they will be handled somewhat differently just because Antonio has a significant injury history with hamstrings. He plays with pace, which tends to also increase some of that hamstring risk, whereas Cresswell, as a defender, doesn't have as much risk in general. But that being said, with them, with having Champions League football in sight and Antonio having the summer to potentially recover, the risk reward here for the club and for Moyes may very well much lean towards playing him as much as he can. That's always an interesting tightrope, especially as it gets down to the wire.
So if you were, making a guess in terms of Fantasy Premier League, would you risk having Antonio in your team?
I probably would. I just think their chance to get Champions League is potentially a club transforming potential for them, especially with how much monetary incentive there is there. So I think he's gonna play. I'd lean toward him playing. Now, will he get injured during the match? That's hard to say.
And that's what we have seen towards the end of this season. It's sad to see because I do have a soft spot for West Ham. I would like to see them pip our rivals Chelsea in this situation here. But we do have to move on to the final quick discussion that we have here. Summer 2021. It's going to be a good one because we do have the delayed Euro 2020. But you add that to the fact of last season with the COVID hit season, very short pre-season for a lot of these players. Next season, World Cup 2022. Do you actually have a bit of a fear here, Raj, that there'll be a glut of injuries over the next few seasons and some players are put at serious risk?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you think about how many matches these players are being asked to play over this 2-year period with limited rest time, I don't think you're going to see a decrease in injury risk until probably summer 23. Because I mean, it's almost ridiculous if you think about, like you said, the shortened preseason into a congested schedule this season, and then into the summer tournaments, and then you have coming up after that, the World Cup preparation and everything that comes into that as well, and then in this case, a World Cup that's in the wintertime, which completely throws everyone's training patterns for a loop, right? So that's a whole other variable that's just throwing everything kind of into flux. And so you're definitely going to see increased injury risk and very likely injuries as well for the foreseeable future.
With this in mind, do you think that over the next couple of seasons we might see more rotation of players as well? You know, high-profile ones like Kevin De Bruyne and Harry Kane, who will undoubtedly play, especially if England, Belgium get late into both of these tournaments. Do you think that there's going to be a real risk of their minutes managed in the Premier League, Champions League, and whatever other tournaments they're involved in?
I mean, I think you have to anticipate some rotation, but with key players like that, there's always that push and pull of whether we do play them or not. I mean, with Harry Kane, we've seen him come back constantly, quickly from injuries, and a lot that end up costing him with a re-injury, right? So it also comes down to the team. Like with what we saw with Man City with De Bruyne, they were able to withstand him being out. You know, it helps when you can invest $1 billion over the last 5 years into your team. That's always nice. And so you're able to withstand some of that. Whereas with a guy like Kane, who they're really relying on as kind of their main, their center point, especially with, with Son Heung-min kind of falling off a little bit as the season has gone on, whether it's due to injuries or fatigue, right? Then it becomes, he might be a player that's called on more versus a player where there is more depth to rotate through.
So with that final comment there from you, Raj, that's all that we've got time for today. As always, you are on here weekly on the Premier Injuries channel, but you're also more often on your Free CB Performance channel. So I recommend everybody to check out your Twitter, your YouTube, and just give yourself a follow, because it is always fantastic comment, and it will be coming through the summer as well, just like us. But for now, I'll just thank you as always from Premier Injuries here and wish you a good rest of your week.
You too. Thanks for having me as always.